Hey everybody, it's springtime, which means it's time to get our lawns in gear. And what I've learned over the past couple of years is one of the most important things I can do to have a nice, green, healthy lawn is to address the weeds. Now, before I knew what I'm going to share with you today, I would just spend lots of time pulling weeds, or worse, I would go and get any herbicide I can get my hands on and spray those herbicides into the yard. And I found I was always fighting weeds. It was like a game of whack-a-mole. And so about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I stumbled upon the lawn care nut, and I learned how to prevent weeds and why weed prevention is really like one of the top things you can do for your lawn. So I'm going to share with you, I think 7 or 8 tips I've learned over the last few years and how they've helped me. Every year when we are in the peak growing season, at least once a week, but sometimes as many as 2 or 3 times a week, as people are walking by our yard, they ask us, whether it's my kids or my wife or myself, how we like our artificial turf. And we always laugh because we don't have artificial turf. We have regular grass. We have Zeon Zoysia. And it is so perfect looking for a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons are there's no weeds. I think last year I may have pulled a handful of weeds, but I didn't spray any herbicides on my lawn last year at all. Not one time in the growing season last year did I spray harmful chemicals on my lawn. And the secret is pre-emergent. Now here's why this is so important. Having a healthy stand of grass is actually going to be cheaper and save you time as well as money, and it'll actually be healthier for you. Here's why. When you have weeds in your grass, when you water or when it rains and when you fertilize, those weeds compete for those nutrients and that moisture. And so you need to have more water and more fertilizer or nutrients to put on your grass. If you can eliminate a source of an undesirable weed that's in your grass, it will actually save you water and save the lawn stress and save fertilizer as well. As a byproduct, your grass will continue to grow and become thicker and thicker and thicker, and it will on its own be a defense against weed seeds blowing in. So really knowing how to prevent weeds it's the cheapest thing you can do. It will save you time. It's better for your soil and for the environment, and lastly, it looks better. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. The first tip is knowing when to apply your preventative. There are really 2 windows, one in the spring, one in the fall, that you have. You can't just apply preventative any time of the year. I mean, I guess you can, but it really won't be effective. The time to apply weed preventative is in the spring and in the fall, when temperatures fall in this window of 55 to 70 or 65, I forget which one it is, but there's a range going from 55 to I think 70 degrees, and that's soil temperature. When your soil is in that window of 55 to 70, that's when seeds start to germinate. So when you're coming out of winter going into the spring, as the soil temperature warms up, you have that window. That's when you apply it. And when you get out of that window, seeds have already germinated and your preventative isn't doing anything. Also, as you get through the summer, as you start to come down in the fall, for us here in South Texas, that's usually the end of September, middle of October, usually around by Halloween is when I really start to notice the soil temperatures drop. You do it again for winter weeds. So those are your 2 windows. Now, how do you know what your soil temperature is? You could get a thermometer, like a meat thermometer or like a probe, and you could actually go and test certain spots of your lawn, which is totally good. There's also a free tool online called Greencast. I put a link in the description below. You can go to that website, put your zip code in. You can see what the current soil temperature is, what the last 24 hours average was, what it was historically 5 years ago, and what it was 10 years ago, or the average. I forget how they do it. That tool is what I use, and that's helped me over the years know that in South Texas, where I am, in San Antonio, usually around Valentine's Day, mid-February, and usually I think it's in the fall sometime, I forget what it is. I have it written down on my calendar. Those are the moments historically when I should begin to start thinking about preparing. Now, normally I would have done my Pre-Emergent app a couple of weeks ago, but we had the big snowstorm, and right as I was about to apply the preventative, we had, you know, record snow in our soil. It got freezing and there was no use, and so it's kind of reset, but it's starting to get warm and I'm in my perfect window. I'm going to show a graphic from the Lawn Care Nut. He's kind of produced this. It's been really helpful for me, and it's a great graphical representation to show you when to start applying and thinking about not just fertilizer but pre-emergence. And I think this works wherever you're at, whatever, if you have cool season or warm season, doesn't matter. Soil temps drive everything. That's the number one tip. Understand your soil temperature. The second tip is understanding what to apply. Now, if you were to go to the big box store and find like a bag of granular fertilizer, most likely you're gonna find one of two ingredients in there. One is either prodiamine and one is either dithiopyr. Those are two of the most common, and you might find some other ones. What I found is prodiamine is like the number one go-to standard for pre-emergent, no matter where you are, cool season or warm season grass. The good news is you can find the active ingredient cheap online at a place like Amazon or do your own. And so that's what I did a couple of years ago. I bought a gallon of this prodiamine. It's called WDG 65 water dispersible granular. And I think it was about maybe $65. I can't remember how much it was. This thing is still full. I may have used this much, maybe. This thing will last me for 20 years. I end up teaching my neighbors how to do this. I give it away to friends, and I spent maybe double what I would have at the big box store one time. And I'm good for maybe 20 years based on my lawn size. And so if you've never done this, look for the active ingredient prodiamine. Dithiopyr is okay too. These chemicals have a yearly maximum, so you can only put so much of it in your ground without harming things. So I usually put prodiamine in the spring to the yearly max, and then in the fall I switch it up and I use dithiopyr. The third tip is knowing how much you need. Now, early on, I would go and buy a bag of fertilizer and I would assume I should put the whole bag down, and I had no clue what my lawn size was, what my square footage was, and how much of any product I need to put down. And so this tip is really about understanding your square footage of your yard. You could use Google Maps, you could take a tape measure out, get a rough drawing of your area. For me, I know I have about 2,500 square feet of grass, and so I always work in like multiples of 2.5. Most things are figured to 1,000 square feet, so whatever that is, I just multiply it by 2.5. So know what your grass size is in square footage, and then you can either open the label of the product and do the math there. It'll usually tell you how many pounds of product per 1,000. But Grass Daddy has actually created a website where you go in and you can select your grass type. You can select how many months of control you want, and then you put all that in there, and it tells you this is how much prodiamine you need per 1,000 square feet for your application. And that's a huge help. Thanks, Grass Daddy, for doing that. The fourth tip, I don't know if it's necessary, but it's probably helpful, and that is, if you can, mow or scalp your yard before you apply. Now, I don't know if you have St. Augustine, if that would work, because I know usually St. Augustine is kept tall. I've had Bermuda and I have Zoysia, and it's generally best in the spring to scalp those suckers, remove all the dead material to make way for new growth. Also, the goal of a pre-emergent is to get the active ingredient down into the soil level. So if you have matted grass, if you've got really tall grass, you run the risk of the active ingredient not getting into the soil. And so I've got a pretty short stand of grass, but a lot of it's been dead. So today I'm gonna scalp and mow before I apply it. But that may be something to consider. Do you need to mow and get rid of a lot of dead material and provide a way to allow the active ingredient into the soil? The fifth tip is to figure out how to apply evenly. Now, this Might depend on if you're doing a granular app or if you're doing a liquid app. I like to do liquid because I have a backpack sprayer, I've calibrated it, I know how much water, how many gallons. Usually I've got it to where about 1 gallon goes to 1,000 square feet. I know how fast I need to walk, I know how I need to space it. There's tons of videos online to learn how to calibrate that stuff. But your goal is to really apply it in the most even way possible. And kind of a pro tip here is to do what is called split apps, right? So think of it like this. If you were spray painting something, it would be better to do multiple light coats than like one big heavy coat and get drippings and get an uneven thing. So with any type of fertilizer or even kind of a pre-emergent like this, what you want to do is to figure out how to do it evenly, but do it in half. So for example, instead of me applying 6 months of Prodiamine, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the calculations for 3 months. I'm going to do a split app. I'm going to do an app now, and then I'm going to do an app in about 2.5 months, right when I'm starting to come out of protection. What that'll do is that'll hedge me against any errors that I make. You know, if I'm doing all of it at one time and I make a massive mistake, I've got no room for error. So generally what I'll do is I'll do half, my split app half, and then on that half, I'll do that one in half. So I'll go, say, north to south with half of it, and then I'll turn around and go east to west, and I'll go perpendicular. And what you don't want to do is to put all your stuff out just going in one direction. So I kind of put, in this case, a quarter of it out going this way, and then the same day, a quarter of it going out this way. I've got half of my app down, but I've got it evenly. And then in a couple of months, I'll put a calendar notification in and I'll do the same thing. And that gives me an even blanket coverage as much as I can based on my experience, my equipment, my calibration. The goal is to try to get an even amount of pre-emergent into the soil at the right time based on soil temperatures. Tip number 6 is simply to protect yourself. Wear long pants, especially if you're doing liquid. Wear closed-toed shoes. I have an old pair of tennis shoes I use just for this type of stuff. Wear gloves if you need to. Wear a mask and eye protection. You don't want these chemicals getting on your skin or in your body or in your mouth or in your eyes or in your respiratory system. Be smart. Don't be a hero. Take care of yourself. Wear the right protective gear when you're applying stuff, especially if it's liquid. Don't do it when it's windy. The last tip, tip number 7, is to water it in. It's kind of pointless to put these things out there, especially if it's liquid and you've kind of sprayed the pre-emergent and it's kind of sitting on the grass leaf, and then like the sun comes out and rain isn't in the what's going to happen? It's just going to get evaporated. It's not going to go down into the soil. And so I've already looked at my forecast. I got no rain in the next week. And so whenever I apply mine today, I'm going to apply split app evenly after I mow, after I scalp. I know my soil temperature is right where I want it. And then when I'm done, I'm going to take the water hose and I'm going to spend some time and lightly water it in and just encourage it to go down a little bit more. And then after that, I'm going to run the sprinkler for like maybe 10 or 15 minutes and allow it to set in. I'm basically doing everything I can in my control to make sure I'm applying this pre-emergent at the right soil temperature, which is right now in between 55 and 70 or 50 and 70 degrees. I'm going to try to apply it at the right rate, evenly with a split app going both directions. I'm going to protect myself. And I'm going to make sure there's nothing in the way by mowing and scalping and getting all the leaves off and getting a clean canvas, so to speak. And then I'm going to gently water it in to make sure it gets in the soil. So I want to show you just some pictures of what my yard looks like right now, where I have maintained a pre-emergent game. And I'm going to show you pictures of where I haven't maintained, where I neglected last year on purpose to see what would happen. The results are amazing. And then I want to show you a picture of what my yard looks like in the summer in its full glory. It totally looks fake. Are you up for throwing down with me? Let's go.